In the Middle Ages, winter was more than just a season. It was a challenge. A long, cold stretch between the last harvest and the first thaw. A test of strength, not only physical but mental, and one of the main ways to survive it was to sleep. People then didn't sleep the way we do now. Their nights were longer, colder, and most importantly, divided in two. Historians call it segmented sleep. The first sleep, a waking period, and then the second. In between, 1 or 2 hours of calm. Back then, no one was surprised to wake up at night. It wasn't insomnia, it was that natural. Just a pause, to check the fire, feed the child, whisper something in the dark, and then lie back down, to sink into a deeper, softer sleep. This rhythm wasn't invented. It emerged from the world itself, from how cold the room was, how thick the walls were, how long the night lasted, and how little there was to do in the dark, except to wait, to think, and to dream. For peasants and townsfolk alike, sleep wasn't private. It was shared. 1 bed, 2, 3, sometimes 5 people, huddled together not for love, but for warmth. You didn't ask for space. You didn't get to turn away. You slept the way you lived, close to others. And somehow it worked. No sound machines, no melatonin. Just a fire barely glowing in the stove. And the breath of someone next to you. The cold shaped everything. How people built their homes. How they cooked. And especially how they slept. Wooden walls didn't hold heat well. Windows, if there were any, were small and drafty. Blankets were few, so people used what they had: straw mattresses, sheepskin, old cloaks. And most importantly, each other. Whole families would sleep together. Children nestled between parents. Grandparents curled along the outer edges. Bodies tangled, layers piled, warmth shared. It wasn't comfortable, but it was survival. The fire was life. If there was a stove, it was made of clay or stone. It would be fed all day, and then sealed tight at night to radiate what heat it could. Some built beds near it, others simply lay close on the floor. And in the deepest winter, even animals were brought inside. A goat in the corner, a hen near the hearth. Not for convenience, but for body heat. People didn't sleep to rest. They slept to preserve energy, because the fewer hours you were awake, the fewer calories you burned. In the bitter cold, sleep wasn't just rest. It was strategy, an agreement between the body and the season. You stay quiet, and I'll keep you alive. And when that first sleep ended, around midnight, people would wake, not startled, not afraid, just awake. Despite the popular image of medieval people as grim-faced survivors, there was something deeply human in how they slept. There were no pillows like ours, no thick mattresses, just a wooden frame or maybe a low platform covered in straw, a rough cloth thrown over it, maybe a wool blanket if you were lucky. And into that heap, the whole family would crawl. Not for comfort, but for warmth. They snored. They muttered. They bumped elbows and stole covers. One got up to relieve himself, the other shifted to take his place. It was messy, cramped, and entirely necessary. This wasn't a personal ritual. It was a shared resistance against the cold. 1 person in a room might freeze, but 10. They could make a pocket of warmth, a small breathing shelter. The kitchen was often the bedroom too, where the fire lived. A hearth, glowing, then smoldering, gave the last heat of the day. People laid themselves near it, children closest to the flames, the elderly near the back wall covered in old coats. In some homes, there was a raised sleeping shelf, warmest near the roof. In others, the prized spot was directly on top of the stove. Not elegant, but life-saving. Castles and monasteries were colder. Thick stone walls, yes, but poor insulation. Windows were plugged with cloth. Sometimes people lit candles just to warm the air around their faces. And through it all, no one thought this strange. A single room, everyone sleeping together. No shame, no boundaries. Just bodies in the dark, trying to last through the night. Winter demanded more than endurance. It asked for stillness, for silence, for surrender. People learned to move less, speak less, need less. Because every step burned calories. Every breath lost heat. Every chore carried risk. So they learned to pause. At night, they didn't rise unless truly necessary. Not to fetch water, not to empty a pot, not even to tend the animals unless something was wrong. They waited until morning, until the sun, pale and late, gave them permission to move. To survive meant saving strength. And sleep, real, deep sleep, was part of that. They had tricks. Some slept in hats, others wrapped scarves around their faces. Children were tucked head to toe, so only their noses showed. If there was a brick or stone warmed by the fire, they wrapped it in cloth and placed it by their feet. Sometimes a jug of warm water was placed under the covers, not to drink, just to hold. A temporary sun fading slowly in the dark. Children were taught early, never sleep alone in winter. Even if you're angry, even if you feel too old, lie close to someone. Because anger fades, but cold stays. This wasn't superstition, it was survival. Dreams came easier that way, deeper, more physical. Not something to analyze or record, but to live through. A dream of fire could feel like warmth on the cheek. A dream of a voice could sound like a whisper in the room. Sleep became a shared journey, not just a biological need, but a communal act. Sometimes it seems like people back then were tougher, that they endured more, less food, less comfort, less everything. But maybe the difference wasn't toughness. Maybe it was rhythm, an ability to surrender to the season instead of fighting it. Winter wasn't the enemy. It was simply reality, something you prepared for, accepted, lived with. Preparation started early. In autumn, homes were sealed, cracks stuffed with straw or cloth, windows covered, doors padded. Nothing was wasted. A rug on the wall wasn't for decoration. It was a wind block. Every corner was insulated with care. Beds were placed strategically, close to the stove, far from the door. Children slept in the middle, the weak wrapped in furs. People didn't undress fully. They slept in their linen shirts, their socks, their coats if needed. And still, it was cold. But there was also peace. A kind of peace only winter allows. Because you couldn't go to the fields, couldn't haul water easily, couldn't do much of anything. So you slept. You stayed close. You waited. And in that stillness, something softened, inside. Sometimes all a person could do was lie down and let the night pass over them. Let sleep do the work. That daylight couldn't. Medieval nights were long, not just by the clock, but by the soul. They were deep, heavy, quiet in a way we rarely know today. And yet, not dark. Light came from the fire, from a single candle, from the glowing red of coals in the hearth. It danced. It flickered across walls, reflected in pots and spoons, made shadows out of elbows and cheeks and shoulders. It was enough to gather around, enough to tell stories. The kitchen became a ship, sailing through black snowstorms outside. Inside, warmth, breath, the scratch of wool, the creak of the roof. Children listened wide-eyed to tales of forest spirits, ghosts in the snow, a moon that watched you walk at night, not to frighten them, but to pass the time, to remind them that the world was big, mysterious, but also survivable. Even fear felt different. It wasn't fear of failure, of deadlines, of judgment. It was simple. Will the roof leak? Will the cow give birth safely? Will the fire last? Concrete things, immediate, shared by all. And when night truly settled in, it didn't divide people. It brought them closer. Sleep was a collective act, like prayer, like dinner. It happened when the dark told you it was time, not the clock. And waking in the night, that wasn't failure. It was a gift. Sometimes winter brought more than cold. It brought loneliness, not just for the old or the poor, but for anyone left without a warm body beside them. The dark didn't scare them. They were used to it. What scared them was silence, the kind where no one breathed next to you, where no hand moved under the same blanket. In those moments, even animals became companions. A dog at your feet, a cat behind your knees, a hen under the cot. Anything that gave off heat was welcome. There are stories of children falling asleep curled around a lamb, not out of love, but because the lamb was the only other warm thing in the house. This wasn't quaint. It was survival. Heat wasn't a luxury. It was the only true wealth. If the fire failed, if the wind crept in, you might not wake. No drama, no tragedy, just a still body in the morning. And so, sleep was sacred. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't trimmed or optimized. It was lived fully, like a meal. Even monks, in their strict routines, kept the rhythm of segmented sleep. Their midnight prayers came not at the end of rest, but between its two halves. Night had value, not as productivity, but as stillness. And in that stillness, families drew even closer, not emotionally, physically, backs against walls, hearts against shoulders, a pile of sleeping bodies, wrapped around one another like a human hearth. Sleep in the Middle Ages wasn't just rest. It was part of the order of life. People didn't speak of it as a science. They didn't need apps, timers, or tips. They simply listened. To their bodies, to the dark, to the silence. There was no shame in waking at midnight, no frustration. It wasn't a problem to fix. It was an invitation. An hour of wakefulness in the quiet wasn't lost time. It was found. Some used it to tend the fire, some to think, to pray, to hold a loved one's hand in the dark, and say something that couldn't be said in daylight. No rush, no urgency, just presence. Even now, researchers say, if you take away the light, if you let people sleep naturally, they fall into that same rhythm. First sleep, a pause. Second sleep, it's not outdated. It's encoded. Maybe that's why we sometimes wake in the middle of the night, unsure why. Maybe our bodies still remember. In that old pause, people found clarity, not always comfort, but truth. No distractions, no noise, just the sound of breath, of fire crackling, of wood settling in the roof. And in that hush, they made peace with the day and prepared to meet the second sleep, as one might meet a friend. In winter, even time seemed to slow. Words came softer, steps fewer, breath deeper. The world whispered, rest, and people listened. Sleep wasn't a break from doing. It was a way of being. Children weren't taught sleep routines. They weren't tucked in with bedtime stories. They were simply wrapped up, given a piece of bread to quiet the stomach, and told gently, go rest. No songs, no warnings, just quiet. Mothers shut the shutters to block the wind. Heated stones were placed under blankets. Warm coals wrapped in cloth sat by feet. Babies were pulled into the bed. So were elders, especially the elders. They didn't sleep soundly, but they slept nearby, their breathing a low hum in the dark, a reminder that life still moved, even slowly. And in those long nights, connection didn't come through words. It came through warmth. You didn't need conversation, just another body beside you, exhaling in rhythm. Siblings adjusted to each other's breath. A child might twitch, and the mother, without waking, pull the blanket higher. It was a silent choreography, a night dance, practiced over hundreds of winters. Waking at night didn't break that bond. It strengthened it, because even in stirring, no one left, no one was alone. And when sleep returned, it returned not as escape, but as continuation, of breath, of warmth, of being held by the night. Then came the factories, the bells, the clocks, electric light, and slowly, the night was taken from us. Sleep changed. It became mechanical, compressed, private. We stopped waking in the dark, not because we no longer needed to, but because we were told not to. A full 8 hours, no interruptions. Anything else? A disorder. But our bodies never fully agreed. And even now, when given darkness, quiet, and time, they remember. They fall back into the old rhythm. 2 halves, 1 pause. It happens in cabins, in villages, in homes where the power goes out. We wake at night, not with panic, but with stillness, because somewhere deep down, we know this was the way. In the countryside, it still lingers. Fewer streetlights, less noise, more room for pause. And when someone wakes at 3 a.m., they don't reach for a screen. They sit, they stir the fire, they listen to the house. Sleep isn't broken, it's breathing. It rises, it falls, like snow on a roof. It doesn't need fixing, it needs remembering. Winter taught that, not by lectures, but by silence. To lie still, to breathe with the room, to hear others breathing too. That was the truest comfort. Dreams in those long winter nights were not just dreams. They were vivid, heavy, tied to the cold, to the hunger, to the breath of others sleeping nearby. People dreamed of fire, of spring, of their dead, and they didn't fear it. They didn't analyze, didn't keep journals. They simply remembered. or forgot. But when a dream stayed, they held it quietly, like a secret or a sign. Some dreams were shared aloud, murmured over morning bread. Others never left the bed they came in, still warm, still wrapped in night. The boundary between sleep and wake was thin, porous, especially when you lived in a single room, where night never fully ended, and day began as a whisper. A baby stirred. That was morning. The smoke changed color. That was morning. A rooster somewhere? Yes, now it's morning. But you didn't leap up. You listened. Who else was breathing? Who had shifted? Did the coals still glow? Only then. You rose, and slowly. Winter allowed for that. It didn't rush you. It cradled you, even as it threatened you. You moved from dream to day, without tearing the seam. There was continuity, not interruption. A rhythm that asked nothing but attention. Some winter days blurred together. Endless snow, sky the color of ash, light fading by mid-afternoon. People lost track. Was it morning, evening? Did it matter? If the fire was still alive, if no one had frozen in the night, then yes, it was morning enough. And if the fire had died, then someone stirred. Not with panic, with duty. Placed a log, blew gently, listened for the crackle. Children didn't ask what time it was. They looked at the walls, at the frost patterns on glass, at the way breath hung in the air. Some slept in shifts, some barely rose. Not out of laziness, but wisdom. Why burn energy when there's no field to plow? Why move when stillness means survival? Even conversation quieted. Voices were soft, words slow, pauses long. What's the hurry? When the road is buried, the barn sealed, the sky silent, the house became a world. 4 walls, a womb. Inside, fire, breath, the scrape of spoon against pot. Outside, nothing. Not danger, just vastness. Cold without end. So people stayed close. Close to heat. Close to one another. Close to sleep. It wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. And in that stillness, the body remembered how to rest. Not as a break from doing, but as a way of being. Sleep in those times was not private. It was shared. Lived together. One room. One hearth. 10 breaths rising and falling. In the same dark. There were no bedrooms. No closed doors. No my side of the bed. Just bodies. Tangled, overlapping, aligned. And no one felt ashamed, because survival left no room for shame. Children slept pressed between their parents. Grandparents curled along the walls. Guests, if any, made room at the edge. Everyone knew their place. You didn't apologize for snoring. You didn't ask for silence. You didn't expect space. You lay down, where there was room, and you joined the breath. That rhythm, that shared rhythm, was comfort. People who lost their families felt it most. They weren't cold because they had no blanket. They were cold because no one breathed beside them. And they knew it. That's why some widows would sleep near the stove, not just for heat, but for the illusion of a heartbeat. Even strangers, when sleeping under the same roof, became kin for the night, a kind of pact. You sleep, I sleep. We keep each other warm, no words, just warmth. Even now, when someone hums in the dark, an old lullaby, half forgotten, you can feel it. That memory, that echo of a time when sleep was not lonely. When spring came, the rhythm shifted. Nights grew shorter. The cold retreated. Sleep became lighter, more restless, more fragmented. But the memory of winter nights, it stayed. Even in summer, some would wake in the middle of the night, out of habit, not with fear, but with instinct. They'd sit up, touch the wall, listen to the room, not because something was wrong, but because that's what they'd always done. And slowly they'd lie back down, because the silence wasn't empty. It was full of memory, of breath, of the slow patience winter had taught them. You didn't leap from sleep into day. You slid. First breath, then sound, then light. And maybe that's what we've lost. Not just the silence, but the softness of return. Now we wake with alarms. We bolt. We scroll. We calculate the hours we got, the minutes we've lost. But then, you just woke and listened. If the fire was warm, if no one had cried out, If the roof still held, then all was well. That was enough. You didn't measure your worth in sleep. You simply slept. Not to be better, not to do more, just because night had come, and asked for nothing but your stillness. We can't return to the Middle Ages, and we shouldn't. But maybe, just maybe, we can reclaim something they knew without ever naming it. The wisdom of the night. That sleep isn't a performance. It isn't a metric. It's not about success, or optimization, or routines. It's about surrender, about lying down next to someone and letting go, about closing your eyes, not to escape the day, but to become part of the dark. Night doesn't need fixing. It needs remembering. We once slept together, literally. Our bodies pressed together, our fears soothed by proximity. Now we sleep alone, in soundproofed rooms, with white noise and blue light. And we wonder why we feel so far from peace. It's not the bed. It's not the hours. It's the absence of warmth, of rhythm, of silence shared. But it's not lost. Not completely. Sometimes, when the power goes out, or the snow falls heavy, or you wake at 3 a.m. for no reason, you feel it. The old rhythm, the hush, the stillness beneath the noise. And if you do, don't rush. Lie still. Listen. Touch the wall beside you. Feel your own breath. You're not broken. You're remembering. If this story stirred something in you, leave a comment. Tell me what came up for you in the quiet. If it felt warm, or familiar, or just true, tap the like. And when you're ready, tap the screen. The next story is waiting, and night isn't done speaking yet.